loengust tuleb juttu.
In my presentation, I would like to speak about the trading and waterways influencing Estonia during the Viking Age and afterwards. And I'm going to speak about the boat burials, and we try to date them also. Salme boat funerals come from the time which coincides with the Eastern Viking area, when their Aldejuborg Center was founded around 750 AD. That was one of the Scandinavian handicraft and trading centers which were formed at the same time in Sweden, Birka, in Denmark, Helgeribe, and in Norway, Kaupang. Obviously, their Nordic people didn't sail much before that, during the 7th century, further than Finnish Bay, except the Ladoga area. On the basis of findings, we can say that later their forefathers of Scandinavians visited both their northern and southern part of Scandinavian coastline, including Saaremaa. Austrvegr, before the Varangians, the roots bonded their Scandinavians with their Caspian area. That network took some time before Vikings. Already parts of this route were used from their Baltic Sea to the Caspian Sea. And the experience using these routes were collected by several Eastern people, including our Western Balts. And it is worth to mention also the Roman mints during that period. Roman coins reached us mostly through Lithuanian forefathers. They were minted in Italy during the 1st and 3rd centuries, and their route from Varangians to the Greek, the Provençal, Italian, Roman coins reached our areas. Actually, these are some mystical direct contacts with the present Mediterranean Sea and the northern areas. Their internationally very important finding was in 2015 near Kunda in Estonia, where more than 50 provincial Roman coins were found, and also some decorations and rings, and in case of that hoard. The most important fact is that most of these coins were made and minted on the territory of the present Turkey. And on their coins, the Roman Caesar Kaiser Caracalla was depicted. Direct contacts with the Mediterranean area, the present Ukrainian area, very well seen also on the in the 6th century. And we can see that these hoards were concentrated on their Lake Peipus Pskov catchment area. And during their hoards and treasures, also silver necklaces with a hook and loop were found. These were found on both the shores of the Lake Peipus and also in the eastern Latvian area. And their piece seen on the screen was found near the Lake Peipus, and 4 pieces reached the museum. Beside these necklaces, there near the river Ema Jõgi, 2 such silver platters were found. And actually, these are from the Byzantine area, region, and actually they were used for serving in the for their very high persons. Ville Tamla, together with the German colleague, have described these platters. And beside their Byzants, actually no such platters were found. Between their above and the platters, several other hoards were found near the lake Peipus. And we see here the Kardla hoard. The University of Tartu took tests from the necklaces, and it was found that the tellurium used for these necklaces was made in Transylvania. So we have the reference to the faraway southern contacts centuries before their Viking era. And the bronze lamp, which was made in Italy in the 1st century. And my colleague Esther took tests from the lamp oil, and it was revealed that the lamp was used in the mid-1st century AD. And it means it is of the same period like their silver items described before. Beside that kind of findings, there are also graves found, and this refers also to their importance of the Dnepr waterways and the lake Peipus, Velika Jõgi, Great River, and their eastern area. They all were connected in the eastern trade network. At the very beginning of their Viking period, we can see their silver treasures and also Arabic coins found near the lake Peipus. So if we ask the question from where the Viking area come from, we could see that it was through their southeastern part of Estonia, through the waves from the eastern part of Europe. And in connection with the Viking era, situation is changing. As I mentioned before, this is the period where the Scandinavians take over the former existing waterways networking, and now their merchants from the northern countries could go to the Caspian and the Black Sea. If we look at the areas nearby Estonia, in the Finnish bay, there were different 2 waterways which connected the Estonian part and Finnish part with the eastern ways. And the Vikings came from the northern part to the northern coast of Estonia, and further they could go towards the Caspian Sea. But one more trading route became very important after the Birka loss. The route past Gotland Isle and came to the Finnish Bay. That waterway, which influenced Estonian Estonia and also Saaremaa, it is characterized by cotton type of payment means. Their silver bracelets, more than 200 items have been found in Estonia. Such bracelets from Denmark and Sweden were not found, but it's very characteristic that that kind of items are found in Estonia and near Latvian coast also. And the Tallinn Vanamõisa hoard had more pieces than the total number found near Gotland. These pieces characterize the use of that particular waterway and near the 10th century. A picture of these bracelets found near Matsalu Bay. This hoard was hidden in a baking oven. And also the oldest Viking era wages were also found in that treasure. Coming back to the Finnish Bay and Gulf of Finland and their waterways here, most of their researchers have stated that most of their sailors preferred the Estonian northern coastline. And another aspect, the Finnish coastline had many settlements, but Estonian coastline had them. And of course, we have to bear in mind what kind of distances their old Viking ships could sail. They had to make stops, they had to load new provisions, and they had to take some rest. And near Tallinn, there was a good possibility to take the turn and start towards the Naissaar. And that was their narrowest part of the Gulf of Finland. And behind their Naissaar, there was a very good harbor, well protected harbor, and Iru hill fort, their strongest one in this area. It had a lot of good protection characteristics. And a lot of archaeological findings have been found near these areas. And also jewelry and decorations from Finland, Sweden, in the northern part of Estonia. More and more findings come into existence. In Estonia, in the 9th, 10th centuries, their dead bodies were burned, and before burning, these bronze pieces of decoration were broken. And finding such kind of items are not a very common feature. Mostly, these small pieces are found, which are very difficult to be interpreted and described, actually. As to Finnish decorations, for myself, their most important finding for myself have been their very specific crossbow-shaped shaped fibulas. Finland was a very important country and area during their pre-Viking era. And in Finland, that kind of fibulars were made, and their pieces found in Estonia were obviously in Finland, and they prove the existence of contacts between Finland and the northern part of Estonia. Of course, these hoards refer to peaceful contacts, but in Estonian settlements and also in the islands, we have found also that Scandinavian type of bow heads, arrowheads, and these may be the proof of warriors who came from Finland, Sweden. And again, all these items, among these items, we have a very monumental type of archaeological findings. There are 4 hills. These reflect their very important development in the Viking era. These 4 hills, hill forts, settlements, they have been found in their Lake Pipers and Scoff area, and also their northern part of Estonia. As you see, the western part of Estonia and the islands don't have them. These hill fort settlements were meant to serve their waterways transport. And Austrvegr sub-branch going along the Narva River towards Lake Peipus. First it went towards their western coast and then towards their eastern coast. And these ancient settlements found there, they mark their direction of this waterways. On this map, Estonian map, the classical Viking era, 9th, 10th centuries, the silver hoards were found as a rule along their northern coast. And their river Emajõgi in the southeastern part. These hoards could originate only thanks to their water lines and waterways. And one of their most important harbors of that line was in Tartu. Of course, nowadays people wouldn't believe that Tartu could be a harbor, but the hoards refer to their ancient settlements and ancient waterways. In Saaremaa, there have also hoards, and the late Viking period, 1030s, 40s, this is their era when these hoards were made in Saaremaa. On the other territory, there were no hoards at that time. Maybe some internal political reasons were those which caused it. Their Yaroslav the Wise army occupied Tartu, and at that time hoards were found in other European countries, but Estonia is actually empty, except Saaremaa western coast. And a picture of their prime time of our forefathers, the second half of the 11th century. We can use their term Viking era and late Viking era, because our Scandinavian colleagues have come to a common understanding that the Viking era, which starts a bit earlier, and it also ends around 1100. It means the prime time, because hordes refer to some trading activities, and we have to stress the second half of the 11th century. This is the time, actually we know some 80 hordes from that period, and this is more than total number found in that period in other Nordic countries. And bog iron was used to make iron and the items of it. The Papers Pskov waterway. If we compare this route after Sebes lakes to Daugava and then the Dnepr river, this is their wettest route connecting with their Mediterranean Sea. Why? Their wettest route was not used from the very beginning, because actually it is a very good route, a lot of water, you can sail there freely. And near the Sebes lakes, you have to tow the boats only some half a kilometer in order to pass their rivulets. But first, people sailed both to the Caspian Sea and also the Mediterranean Sea. To Caspia took the Dnepr route, and the other route was along their Lake Volga. But it happened with the Volga route that the Volgan Bulgars, at the beginning of the 10th century, they decided to take over the Muslim religion, and they didn't let their tradesmen from the Viking tradesmen to pass that route, and they started to ask money and treasures to pass this route. They became money lenders, and the route to the Mediterranean Sea was their most ideal waterway to go to the Mediterranean and Black Sea from their northern countries. And there were also Arabic countries along that route. And in order to finish this topic of waterways, the colleague Ivar Leimus has analyzed their materials of hordes from the whole Nordic area. And it appears that our forefathers at the beginning of the 11th century took their Dnepr waterway as the last persons among the Nordic people. And this is proved by the coins found in our areas. So we started to use the Dnepr waterway, and we were also the last people and nations who took that route.
Actually, the boat burials, ship burials, have not been talked about too much, except for the famous Salme cases. but the locations of them also points to the most important sub-branch of the Austrvegr, which in the 10th and 9th century followed the coastline of the Gulf of Finland. This is a known fact that the tradition of shipbuilding in the Baltic Sea in the 3rd to 4th centuries AD used lace tray clinker planking. And archaeological finds show, both in Finland and in Scandinavia, rivets only in the 6th century. So when the bodies start to be burned in the ships, then the burnt rivets remain as proof in the graveyards. Yeah, we have found about 10 boat burials, or this term covers both ships and boats. When we look at where they are located, then we can mostly see them near Tallinn, around the Iru hill fort area. And when we look at the timing, then it is interesting to see that at least 4 of them belong to the pre-Viking period, which means the same period as the Salme burials, and 2 of them, Lagedi and Aseri, are actually even earlier than the Salme ones. And my colleagues have dated them roughly to the 7th century, when the Salme dating at present tells us that this is between 700 and 750. Mostly those finds come from north-west Estonia. But we shouldn't take this map too seriously, because it rather shows where the investigations are at present, because this is an area that has been more thoroughly excavated, as opposed to the area remaining to the west of Tallinn, the current Keila area and the ancient Vomentagana area. And we have found there individual, occasional items that show us that there have been contacts with Gotland. But no archaeological excavations have been conducted there. My colleague Mati Mandel has been inspected this area thoroughly and found areas, but no excavations, practically no Viking time excavations carried out there on any site. And in addition to the settlements around Ülemiste and Jägala River, you can also find the rivets on the upper reaches of the Pirita River. Here is an interesting fact. When we look at the boat burials in northern Estonia, they are connected with Tarand graves of the Iron Age that by that time had already been left alone for centuries. And in some cases, cremation has been carried out in earlier Tarand graves, and several archaeologists have pointed this out. And on this photo here, the Tarand grave is a reconstruction, actually. This is the Kõmsi Tarand grave after it was excavated and then reconstructed. But boat burials have been found in those same cremation places. And elsewhere, such places in Estonia have been sought as well. Sometimes the bodies have been burnt on the graves themselves, but mostly you can find these places where the bodies were buried in places that were used as places of burial, or the places where the bodies were burnt, in places that were used as graves earlier. When we look at the items here, they help us date the burials, and we can notice here that they have been clearly coming to Estonia from Finland. When in Finland boat burials start to be used in the 6th century, then they arrive via Finland in the 7th century, and this fact refers quite clearly to the section of Austrvegr that became used actively during the pre-Viking period. Despite the fact that we know about 10 different boat burials in Estonia, the earlier finds made decades before can be compared with the Salme boat burials. Namely, because in the case of Salme, the boats have not been burnt, and the Salme burials just have so much unique information about the boats at that time, the number of people, their weapons, their other items. So boat burials, we cannot find out too much about the other boat burials, about the number of people who were buried there, and what the boats look like. And this was the reason was that at that time collective burials were predominant. Then, if we leave aside the boat burials, then also individual burials cannot be separated from each other. So this is the special nature of our customs of that time, and the archaeologists are really sad about this fact. And during the traditional classical Viking era in the 9th and 6th century, there were no inhumation burials in Estonia, apart from this one find near Keila in the Kanama crossroads, where we found this sword dating back to the 8th or 9th century. But we do not know any inhumation burials from the 9th to 10th century. The first ones arrive here through northeast Estonia at the turn of the millennium, and the first graveyards where people have been buried can be found on the 12th century, in the 12th century already near Lake Peipus. I would like to finish here. The last slide, I would like to show to you a photo of a Viking time harbor area today. This is a typical harbor of Viking area in northwest Estonia. We have localized this, so theoretically at one point we will be able to find boat rivets in situ, just like in Saaremaa. But when we look at the graves in North Estonia, then we will not be able to make such findings ever, where the contours of the ships would be visible. No, we just would have a whole heap of rivers and items imported from elsewhere. And this is it. Thank you for your attention.
There is a question from workshop environment. What does the reference, the Viking vessels could have only traveled shorter distances during the day, mean? It is unclear because Skuldelev reconstruction testings have been able to travel from Europe to Iceland and further in one go, hence covering bigger distances than in northern Estonia. Unfortunately, this presentation seems to give a rather narrow definition of seafaring in the past, referencing both vessel and human capabilities. I think, as Mauri can't answer this, I think this is a good comment on the capability of what is the longest distance a vessel can go in one go without going to the seashore. But there might be another aspect looking at it, whether the seafarers chose to sleep on the deck of the ship or whether they wanted to go to the shore for the night as well. But And the second comment from Marika.
But because this part about its question was directly read from my book, and this is my idea actually. So that when I was talking of these like 1 day distances, then we just know that when as long as these Viking ships were peaceful and they were trade ships, they normally tried to land at night, because there were different dangers at night. Plus there were some traditions, or like it was completely legal for people in the Viking Age to rob the boat, to kill the men, or at least plunder the weir, as long as they stayed outside harbors. And this argument was actually my argument, as I say, is that we see that along the northern Estonian coast, then the harbor sites, which defined by the nature or terrain, but they are normally also approximately 1 day's sail from each other. Well.
So we have another question.
This is out of curiosity to maybe Jon. How many ship burials do we find east of Salme? I mean, Finland and present-day Russia or Lithuania, more Baltic regions, but in the east. Just thank you.
Frankly, I don't know. We have the Ibn a burial, of course, known from the literary sources. I don't know really. I don't. And Neil shakes his head. So it is primarily a Western phenomenon. So from present-day Sweden, and then when we come into the 9th century, there are hundreds of them in Norway, some in Denmark, and of course a few ones in the British Isles. So.
And Jon, another one. The Valsjärd drawings you showed us, there weren't the human remains. Are they very decayed, or where were the bodies there?
That's a thing that has been debated a lot through, and it is often said that there are no bodies in the Valsjärd graves, but that is not correct, because there are, in most boat burials in Valsjärd, there are remains of the human. There are human remains, but they are much poorer preserved than the animal remains in the front of the boat. So in some cases, it's only a finger bone attached to the copper corrosions of a sword, and sometimes you can recognize large parts of the body, but still badly preserved.
Thank you.